Greetings, everyone. I'm Pete Pardo from Sea of Tranquility, here to report the passing of another rock great. This one stings quite a bit because if you're of a certain age, you no doubt perhaps grew up a Kiss fan, and we have just lost Space Ace. Ace Frehley himself has passed away at the age of 74. Born Paul Daniel Frehley in New York City back April 27, 1951. Had a fall in his recording studio a few weeks ago and has been in the hospital ever since, suffering brain bleed, and did come off life support just about an hour or so ago. His family and friends are reporting. Passes on October 16th, 2025, like I said, at the age of 74. So, one of those guitar players that maybe lacked some of the finesse and the technical ability of lots of other famous guitar players that have burst on the scene in the same kind of time period as Ace Frehley. But for many teenagers growing up in the 70s and in the early 80s, Ace was the guy. He was the guy. He may not have had the amazing technical skills of an Eddie Van Halen or a Yngwie Malmsteen or a Jimi Hendrix, but, just as legendary as a lot of those players and just as important, not so much to, the evolution of guitar and guitar playing, but so influential in helping drive young people of a certain age in that time period to want to go play guitar. I mean, how many guitar legends have we seen in the wake of, the Kiss phenomenon of the mid-late 70s? Came onto the scene later in the 80s into the 90s, and, you read interviews with them and they talk about their influences. Ace Frehley's name comes up all the time. Look at Dimebag Darrell from Pantera, right? The late, great Dimebag Darrell. Ace was one of his guitar heroes. There's plenty more stories like that. So many more. And whether you were a Kiss fan or not, most of us who were Kiss fans growing up back then, we started thinking that being a guitar player was kind of cool because of Ace. He wasn't the guy for me. I really liked Ace, but because I got into Kiss at a really early age, by the time I was really, really starting to notice guitar players and starting to figure out who my guitar heroes were, I was already moving on from Kiss's music a little bit. So there were other guys that I really got into a little bit more from a guitar perspective. But I always thought Ace was the coolest. And don't get me wrong, I was drawn to the music of Kiss, not just for the theatricality of it and the makeup, but I liked the songs because they rocked. And I always liked the songs that had the cooler riffs and the cool solos, even though Peter Criss was kind of my guy early on when I was a Kiss fan. When I first started to really get an interest in guitar and guitar playing, I had the kind of the early years being a Kiss fan and loving Ace's playing, and that just kind of, I started to get into other guys. But, Ace's playing, very simple, very tastefully done. He kind of comes from, I always thought of Ace as more of kind of like the guy that came from that kind of classic blues rock school of guitar playing, right? You could tell he was listening to Led Zeppelin and Jimmy Page and Beck and the Stones and maybe the Beatles, right? That was kind of where he came from. And to me, a guy that played lots of really good guitar solos that were perfect for the songs. And, he wasn't overly flashy. Sure, on stage, he had the little smoke machine thing coming out of his Gibson Les Paul. And, he looked cool with the platform shoes, and the makeup was great and the outfit was great. I mean, Ace was the coolest. He was probably one of the coolest rock stars ever. And, when you heard him talk, he had that huge New York City accent, right? And he was just this flaky, fun guy. And, so many people who were rock fans that I've known in my life, and certainly guitar players, all loved Ace Frehley. And so many classic songs, so many classic riffs and solos. I mean, we could sit here and talk all day about those classic albums. But, you know, here he is, right, with the original makeup, right, the original album. Classics on here, right? Strutter, Nothing to Lose, Firehouse, Cold Gin, Deuce. I mean, that opening riff to Deuce, so good. 100,000 Years, Black Diamond, just classic tracks. And you know, not only are the songs themselves and the choruses and the riffs memorable, but the guitar solos are all really memorable too. And he was the guy. My favorite Kiss album of all time, right? Got to Choose is on here. Parasite, you know, he's early on writing one or two songs per album, right? You know, Cold Gin was his song, Parasite's his track, right? Going Blind is on here, and Hotter Than Hell, Let Me Go Rock and Roll All the Way, you know, Watching You. Love the guitar solo in Watching You, so good. Great guitar licks on there. And then, of course, Strange Ways. He wrote that song as well. And then how about that amazing kind of like backwards phased guitar solo on Strange Ways. So good. Probably the first of the early guitar solos that made me go, whoa, that's something pretty wicked and pretty cool, right? You know, we got here, Dress to Kill as well. Great stuff on here. You got Rock and Roll All Night is on here, of course. You know, Rock Bottom's on here. Come On and Love Me. She. That riff in She is just absolutely classic. But, you know, obviously the Kiss album, above all Kiss albums, is this. And I think Ace Frehley shows everything he's got on here. And this is Guitar Hero Ace. Again, maybe he didn't have the technical ability of some of the other guys we mentioned, but he was a guitar hero. He totally was a guitar hero. And just loads and loads of great guitar solos on here, and riffage and anthemic songs and all sorts of good stuff. And then, of course, you know, we move on to like Destroyer. Classic stuff on here, right? How about that solo in Detroit Rock City? Perfectly constructed. You know, we had Bob Ezrin driving him on this album to really start doing stuff that's a little bit more kind of tuneful and tighter, I guess, right? God of Thunder's on here, you know, Shout It Out Loud, Do You Love Me, great stuff. You know, Rock and Roll Over's filled with classics too. A lot of great stuff on there. You got Love Gun, out of the title track to Love Gun, classic. And then you got Shock Me on here, right? The first instance of Ace singing one of his own songs, right? Hey, why not? All of a sudden you hear that voice, like, whoa, that's a different voice in this band, because, you know, the other three guys sang quite a bit. You know, you got the two main singers, Paul and Gene, and then you got Peter, who sang a bit too. For my money, I always thought Peter had the best singing voice out of all of them. And then here you got Ace. It's got that kind of like, you know, that kind of lazy New York drawl thing going on, and not a classic singer at all, but very definitive, you know, very unique. And then, of course, Shock Me's got the cool riff and great guitar solo. And then, of course, on the live album, I'm wearing the shirt, you got Shock Me on there with that classic solo. So good. And, you know, there's other stuff after. Of course, his first solo album. When these solo records came out, you know, a lot of us, I bought all of them as soon as they came out, like immediately. And I remember I was horrified at how much I didn't like Peter's and how disappointed in Gene's, because I thought it was going to be heavier, and it really wasn't. And this was my favorite. And I was like, yeah, Paul's is really good too. Paul's has always been number 2, but this is a really, really good album. And I think here you really got to see what Ace could do on his own outside of Kiss. And that probably he was the guy best suited to go on and have a solo career should he ever decide to do that. Unfortunately, a couple of years later, he didn't have much of a choice, right? You know, Rip It Out is great on here. Speeding Back to My Baby, you got, you know, Wiped Out is so good. You know, Ozone is cool. Snowblind is great. Fractured Mirror, terrific instrumental. A lot of really, really good stuff on here. Of course, you know, New York Groove, the cover, it's terrific. This start to finish, a really, really strong record. Unfortunately, I don't think any of his actual solo albums after Kiss ever really came up to the majesty of this particular one here, but good nonetheless. Dynasty, I like Dynasty quite a bit. I always have, you know. 2000 Man, he sings that one on here. Very, very cool. Hard Times. This guy I Was Made for Loving You. I think there's some really, really good stuff on here. Sure Know Something, Dirty Living, all really good stuff. Good riffs on here. And this is the time period where it's like, well, who's actually playing on these albums, right? I don't know. And then you got Unmasked, which I think has some good playing from him on here. This and music from The Elder. It's kind of like the last gasp from, the Kiss as we knew it. But, and then after that, he had to kind of go out and do his own thing. And I remember being pretty much into the Frehley's Comet stuff right off the bat. Rock Soldiers is a great track. I don't know if a lot of this is really held up all that well. Breakout's okay. Into the Night, Fractured 2 is pretty good. Stranger in a Strange Land, not too bad. I saw them on this tour. I think Ace still kind of had the chops back then, and he still was giving it his all. In more recent times, he's released bunches of solo albums, lots of covers albums. If you go to see Ace live in more recent years, kind of hit or miss on kind of performance you're going to get. It's like, a lot of people say, well, Ace has just been phoning it in, just collecting a paycheck out on the road. And, I get all that. It's, I guess, as, you get older, it's kind of hard. But he never stopped performing for the people. And throughout all the nonsense between him and the band, they had, Psycho Circus, they had the big reunion in the mid-90s, and cool to see them back together again. It did not last, and there's just been this constant feud between them. Are they getting along? Are they feuding? It depends on what year it is, right? And it's just a shame that all that Kiss and Peter built with Peter and Ace built with Kiss in the 70s. It's just amazing, kind of like the treatment that they got later on from the other two, which is kind of sad, because I think, especially Ace, I think deserved a little bit more from that. And you have to wonder deep down inside how much he really missed being in Kiss for all those years. And he struggled a lot with, addictions and things like that over the years. If you read his book and various Kiss books, you can read all the stories about that. But he always just seemed like a blast to be around. And he lived life to the fullest, and he was always on the edge of something, right? But yeah, I mean, and it's a shame that we never got like another like true classic Peter Criss solo record. Was Alien Invaders wasn't too bad. There's a couple that were okay. There's some that I didn't like at all. And I think Ace is just one of those guys that, he needed to be in a band where there was other people kind of writing and creating songs, and he can come in and just kick ass on the guitar and occasionally contribute a song or two. And I think that's where he was best. I think when Ace is in a band where he's like running everything, I don't know if that really played up to his strength at all. It's hard to say. But as a guitar player, a true giant, I think. And, like I said, even though there were guys that were probably way more talented than him, always one of the tastiest players ever. I mean, it's just like, you know what you're getting with Ace. And generally speaking, what you got was always really, really good. Played right for the song, came up with some cool riffs. Solos were always well worked out and very memorable. And he just, he always sounded like he just had, like he was playing it off the cuff, right? Just on the spot. And whatever he played worked out really, really well and sounded very well constructed. So, he's going to be missed. And, plus the fact that he's one of the coolest fucking guys. I mean, just one of the coolest rock stars ever, with or without the makeup. With the makeup on, he was so badass. But even without, yeah, you heard him talk for 2 seconds, you knew it was Ace. You hear him sing, you knew it was Ace. You hear a guitar solo. After the first couple notes, you know it's Ace. So, yeah, it's like a part of my childhood just left today, which is very, very strange. Very strange. This is one of those bands, they got the 4 guys all these years later. And up until this afternoon, all 4 of them still around, still doing stuff. And so, yeah, we're going to miss him. Ace Frehley gone at the age of 74. He leaves us here on October the 16th, 2025. Like I said, the age of 74. Suffering brain bleed from a fall a few weeks ago in his studio. And just never recovered, right? Off life support this afternoon, so we're this early this evening. So, yeah, we'll miss him. Go out and play your classic Kiss and Ace Frehley solo stuff in celebration of the life and the career and the music of Ace Frehley. And we're losing too many of them this year, right? Losing too many of them. So thanks for watching, everybody. I'm Pete Pardo. Enjoy the rest of your evening. We miss you, Ace. Rest in peace. Bye-bye.